Andy, we're here again to cram for the exam. Today's topic, one of our favorites, campaigns and elections.
Yeah, how do we, the people, hold our officials accountable? It's through campaigns and elections.
I would say this is another linkage institution, Andy. Campaigns and elections link we, the people, to you, the government.
That's right. So every 2 years, those representatives running in the House of Representatives are looking for support from the people. Every 4 years, those presidential candidates are seeking your support. And of course, U.S. senators, they're seeking your support every 6 years.
Of course, we're talking presidential elections and we're talking midterm elections. But Andy, ultimately, you must win twice if you're going to win any office in America. You have to win the primary elections and you have to win the general elections.
That's right. In a form of democratization that is expanding the people's role in our government. For the last 50 years, parties have increasingly used primary elections to pick their nominees. So essentially, a candidate has to win 2 elections to win the office. One, they have to be nominated by their party supporters in primary elections. And two, they have to beat the other person in that general election in November.
Let's talk about winning the presidency, Andy. And by way of that model, we'll learn about how to win an election. Presidents have to win twice, you're right, Andy, but there is a shadow primary that happens way before the first primary and caucus, and that is getting noticed and raising money.
If you want to be a serious contender, you need to be mentioned, and you also need to develop almost this personal following, almost like a celebrity, because, hey, you have to be known when you go out there to campaign. But then you have to be raising money so that you can support what can be, for a presidential contest, nearly a 2-year campaign as you start in the Iowa caucus, followed shortly by the New Hampshire primary, in a process that we call front-loading.
Yeah, front-loading, Andy, refers to those early primaries and caucuses, caucus first in Iowa, first primary in New Hampshire, oftentimes months and months before the general election. And Andy, if you don't win in Iowa or New Hampshire, pretty unlikely you're going to win the whole thing.
Well, it's all about winning the 4 M's, right, Dan? It's all about winning, getting mentioned, getting momentum, getting money, and mo money. I guess that's 5 M's.
Let's talk about some of that mo money, Andy, because there's a perception out there that money buys influence and that money buys elections. But let's be honest, there are significant campaign finance laws that limit how much money you and I and those fat cats out there can give.
Yeah, certainly having the most money helps, but it doesn't guarantee an electoral victory. In fact, if you measure how the candidates are getting their money, if you see that a lot of individual donors are giving donations of $200 or less, it really shows a lot of grassroots support that's going to help that candidate on election day.
Let's talk about the most recent campaign finance law, McCain-Feingold, Andy, passed back in the early 2000s. Andy, this law really increased the individual limit from $1,000 to $2,000, give or take some based on inflation now, but it eliminated soft money, that unlimited money we used to be able to give to political parties at the national level.
Yeah, we know that campaign finance laws have been passed both in the 70s and more recently with McCain-Feingold to, one, reduce the role of fat cats, those wealthy donors who can give an unlimited amount of money, but also to get full disclosure, to find out where is this money coming from. But anytime you're dealing with a law about money, you always have major loopholes. And certainly campaign finance is not exempt from that, because as we've tried to reduce what's called the soft money loophole, giving an unlimited amount of money to political parties, we've increased other loopholes for independent groups.
Well, independent expenditures is what you're talking about, Andy. That these are groups sometimes called 527 groups that really have no limits and really have no disclosure. But here's the catch. An independent expenditure group cannot coordinate their advocacy with the candidates themselves. So if, let's say, a 527 named Cram for the exam were to raise millions and millions of dollars and wanted to advocate for one candidate, we could run TV ads, we could send out mailings, we could mobilize grassroots activities, but we couldn't coordinate that with the candidate, nor could we come out and say, hey, vote for that candidate.
That's right. And that's, again, an example of loopholes, that as soon as you try to make a rule about money, you open up another loophole somewhere else. I mean, as the Supreme Court has said in a previous case, money really is like water on a ship. It's going to get in. It's just trying to find ways to plug the leaks, as many as you can.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, and let's not forget that the Supreme Court has consistently protected campaign finance as an essential First Amendment right. They have approved some of the limits, but they will never eradicate money from our politics. And let's go back to the campaign. We've front-loaded. We've won the early primaries. What's next?
Well, after the primaries, we start running for the general election. So again, we are reaching out to that more moderate voter, the rank and file, as we try to get out the vote through our grassroots organizations to try to win the most votes by a plurality on Election Day.
Well, and there runs the problem, Andy, because to win the primaries, you appeal to your base. The base voters tend to be more off on the extreme ends of the political spectrum. But when you win your party's nomination, you now have to race back to the middle and try to find those independent voters, those voters that aren't aligned or loyal to one party or another, to try to develop that political following that you created a year or two earlier. That's the big problem when you run for president. You win the nomination by appealing to your base, looking more ideological, but then you've got to win the general election by appealing to more and more voters sitting in the middle.
And then once you win, I can guarantee you the next day you're thinking about how to win re-election, especially if you're a member of Congress where they don't have term limits. Increasingly, we see those incumbents are running scared, raising money, raising name recognition, serving constituents, all about trying to get re-elected again.
Andy, we haven't even talked about handlers. That these campaigns have become professional marketing campaigns, not just pushing a person, a player, a politician, pushing a whole brand, and that's what our politics has come to. Branding our politics like we brand our morning cereal. What's going on in the news? We know. We're here cramming for the exam. No fancy words.
No fancy suits.
Plain talk about issues you need to know.
Just in time.
Captain Crunch for president, maybe. 2012.